Welcome to an Academia Liberamentis interview. Today I have Willem Engel, Director of Culture, dance guru, but who has also been instructing us in the castle in the subtle art of discussion and conversation, of course, together with his lovely wife-to-be Doreen, who taught us how to edit videos. Welcome, Willem. It's great to see you. It's great to reverse the roles. Normally you interview me.
Correct, yeah. It's great to be a part of ALM, actually, and thank you for the kind introduction. Hopefully, this year I will be much more active in the academy.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing you on the castle on the 7th of February then. Now, I wanted to ask you about your educational vision, if you like. So I want to cover what you think has been happening to the world of education and what solutions there may be to the current problems. So as an introduction, Willem comes from the sort of classic academic education that you can have in the Netherlands. I went through a very similar one. We actually come from the same city, Utrecht. And like me, you did 6 years of research in your PhD. Now
I studied at Leiden. I was only born in Utrecht.
Sure. Similar places, very old towns. So in your years of being part of, as it were, Dutch education and what you've seen since, have there been changes that you can see in terms of how education is done, whether has it become better, less good? What has changed? What have you seen changed?
Well, I think we have to zoom out first because I'm not involved in academia in an active way since 2008, so I don't know the ins and outs what's happening nowadays. Of course, I get a lot of secondary information of people who work there and after speaking out don't work there anymore, or people who still work there but life has become very difficult for them. I see publications, so that's also in that sense secondary because I see the product of what academia produce. So based on those sources, yes, there has been a change. And part of that change, I think, has been developing over a much larger or longer time scale. When I was studying, and it was really end of the 90s, so I studied from 96 to 2001, and then the PhD program was from 2002 to 2008. So I saw some development there, which was at that moment very much focused on liberalizing academia. So instead of being state-funded, it went to being industry-funded. And I think that is one of the most important developments. Now, and what we see the last 15 years, but I did not see that while I was in university, first as a student, then as a PhD, is the ideology that has been taught since. So now we're talking about various strains of, I would say, the same ideology. Then we're talking about climate change ideology. We're talking about the LGBTQ, critical race theory, those clearly unacademic ideas, which have become dogmatic and have become taboos in being able to discuss it. So I think that accelerated during COVID, but I see the origin or the base of that erosion of free academic thinking, independent thinking, has been that foundation has been laid because of the third and the fourth streams of money. I think that is where NGOs and industry have grasped the mindset, the direction of not only what's being thought at academia, but also what function universities have in our society nowadays.
I would concur with that, Willem, and I have a nice anecdote on as it were how academia in the Netherlands used to be. So when I was a student of econometrics in Groningen, one of my professors, Casper Zwijgman, he really cared for Africa and for African farmers and tried to make models to help them grow crops better. And that was when we were still talking about CO2 and climate change. That was definitely part of the conversation. But he made it very clear to us that CO2 should be understood as feeding plants. And so in his model, he was banking on increased CO2 to improve the crops for his poor African farmers. It was clear he was, in that sense, in favor of it. And hence that kind of, rational argumentation, what are the pros, what are the cons, was still very normal then. And what he said wasn't deemed controversial, and nobody went to the top of the University of Groningen to complain about what he'd said. It wouldn't even occur to us to think that, right? He was just making an intellectual argument, which he also backed up with studies and books. So I very much agree with this kind of ideology that has come in and has come to dominate what is done in the classroom. Now, have you also seen a change, if you like, in the student body? And what I mean by that is that, at least when I was a student, when you were a student, students were quite community-oriented. They weren't distracted all the time on their mobile phones. And universities were not themselves busy with helping them become adults because, well, society was still doing that. Have you seen a change in that?
Well, I have not been back to my student fraternity, but what I get from speaking to students and being invited to some student fraternities in Groningen, actually, and in Rotterdam, I see that their vision on society has become much more modest. Mm-hmm. They don't really have the mentality or the notion that they are the leaders of the future, in a sense of shaping society, driving societal changes. Much more in a managerial position. They are being grown or being shaped into somebody who will lead industry or somebody that becomes a judge. In that sense, it's not really an academia anymore. It's much more what we have in Holland, higher education. Mm. You're taught a profession, and that's your goal, and you want to make money. And from that position, where you have influence and money, then you start thinking about the world around you. And I think that is a big change. But again, that was already very much developing. If you look at the generation of our parents, when they studied, studies took much longer. I was in a curriculum that went from 5 years of chemistry, and they started a new education combining chemistry with pharmaceutics, hence pharmaceutical sciences. It went to 4 years. Mm-hmm. Because everything had to be more efficient. Then during my studies, luckily, they came to the conclusion, well, this is not possible. You'll get a 5th year mm-hmm. anyway. But I think that sense of trying to produce cogs in a big machinery and mm-hmm. as fast and efficient as possible, instead of growing thinkers that with their creativity and unique mind can improve or help society. I think that is probably ongoing since the early 80s, and that erosion probably escalated somewhere in 2012, something like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's also very noticeable if you read the mission statements of universities. So, the original Harvard mission statements were all about leading your society and bringing the country along. And it was sort of presumed if you came in as a student that you were looking perhaps at the future prime minister or the head of the church. And so somebody who has to make the story, mm-hmm. right? Not somebody who is, as it were, a minion of the story, right? And now, indeed, that is almost completely gone. Even at the top universities in the West, you're sort of second-class citizen, right? You are a product, a customer, if you like, but not a co-owner of the societal project. Right? In that sense, there's been a death of the academia. I mean, that's very much true. And when scholars talk about that, they say, well, that's inevitable if universities are so big. 40,000 people go to the University of Amsterdam instead of 400. Well, they can't all be the leader of the country. So you got to treat them as what they are, which is, well, these are just the workers.
Exactly. And also when you look at the curriculum, when I was studying, I was wondering, why isn't there like this bridge year? In a bridge year, I would envision that people would be taught not about a specific subject like chemistry or law, but about philosophy, history, society, so that you know what the context is of academic thinking and what is the purpose of you developing your brain and your thinking to solve problems for society as a whole. And that's what I mean with going to a more efficient model. And how do you reach that? To try to fit everything in the same product. In Dutch, we have a very nice word for that: eenheidsworst.
Yeah.
So that's machine-made sausage, and I think that is pretty much what academia has become. Of course, the scale enlargement, which is a direct proponent of liberalization. The idea that a university had to work together, had to increase, had to merge, attract a lot of foreign students. So it becomes a business, it becomes a company, and you have to produce as many articles, as many bachelor and master and PhD students as possible, because that is the measure of the success of the university.
And this has been something that's been ongoing for at least a century, right? The gradual increase in the numbers of students to universities, and also the change of role. Right? It's no longer making leaders. It's not developing minds. You're just ramming some standardized knowledge into people's heads, and as it were, almost making them slave-like, right? To regurgitate stuff. Now, have you noticed any change in sort of loneliness things, right?
With students, definitely, but I would say for society as a whole, since COVID, the atomization of society, especially younger people which are not in a family situation anymore, but just started to stand on themselves, they were hit hardest. And every research, every article shows that. And the irony is that a lot of people warned for that effect because it's so obvious. And indeed, that is exactly what happened. So combined with social media, which also has a negative effect on the social skills, I would say, of young people, it compounds on the poverty of the education and the negative influences of technology in society.
So that's quite a package already, right? I mean, academia no longer making a community, allowing the loneliness, not pushing back, the social media making it worse, of course, the lockdowns on top of that, but also this long-run commodification, if you like, of universities. That's a big change, more propaganda at places. Yeah,
I think propaganda has always been part of education to some extent. When you look at when the school system started, I think Prussia started with it to produce officers and soldiers to serve in their army. So I think mass schooling has always had an outlook on producing workers.
Compliance,
so it's
of course.
Compliance. But I believe in that narrow window of a democratic and free Europe between 45 and 70, I would say. I think a lot of people, because in Europe we had a unique system where it was not fully capitalist, but also not socialist. So if you look at Western and Northern Europe specifically, like the planned economy and social democracies, I think a lot of policymakers were actually trying to improve circumstances, having upward social mobility as a goal, is trying to uplift society. And in that egalitarian view of society is saying, well, we have to make sure that everybody at least can go to university. I think there was a lot of idealism in that in that view on society, which in my view has been captured by what is now known as neoliberalism. And that's where the complete productization, I would say, of education has taken place, and that is really end of the 90s, coming into the next century.
And then I want to pick a final topic on this broader notion of problems, right? So, what is known as cancel culture, the notion of very, very sensitive students who simply can't handle critique and just want to shout out voices. Now, I've noticed this in the many universities I've been part of the last 20 years, and it's gotten worse. I notice this in wider society. People try to cancel each other rather than talk to each other. It's been a general reduction. Now, have you seen the same? And if so, how much of that is just technology rather than anybody pushing for this? You know, how much of this is just, well, all day you're on the mobile phone in a world in which you're always right and everybody else is your enemy?
I think they go hand in hand. When I said 2012, that was really when social media started to pick up on a much larger scale. So one couldn't happen without the other. So social media is a necessity for this development, but whether it's the push, I doubt it. When we in the first years of our foundation for truth, it was first called Virus Truth. Especially Jeroen Pols, our main legal mind, he did some research and trying to piece back together where did policymakers go off the rails, in a sense that nothing was a debate or an argument on the facts anymore, but everything became false morality and putting forward dilemmas. And that was actually Richard Thaler. You're probably familiar with him. The nudging system. And I think that was also a tipping point where policy, especially in the West, started to be about manipulation instead of debate. What you need for that, of course, is the nudging system and some other tools, but also a complete sabotage of the debate itself. So if you look in that broader context or perspective, that now we can place the woke, the LGBTQ, the climate aggression almost, the climate action groups, kick out Black Pete, all those organizations that did not want debate anymore, that want cancellation, which became very pervasive in universities as well, and which is the death of academia, I would say. If you try to sabotage debate, there's nothing more anti-scientific than doing that. But that's exactly what happened in society, especially in policymakers and in politics. The demonization we had before, I would say that is that tool in the toolbox was mainly developed in the Islamization debate we had around 2001, the Twin Tower attacks, etc. So there are some stages to this whole process, but definitely the the cancel culture had a very specific goal. Also in academia, is to try to sabotage debate as a whole.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Also among academics.
Yeah.
Also among academics. Now I want to switch perspectives. I want to go to solutions, right? So we've laid out. We've had a long bitch session, basically, right? Right. All the problems, largely due to factors outside of academia, right? The larger growing of the universities. Yep. The bureaucratization, the sensitivity because of the social media, because of political pressures, commercial pressures. That's a big package. Now, suppose, via some miracle, I could make you the head, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Amsterdam. And suppose by another miracle, the 5 people most important around you, you can pick as well. Do you think you could make any difference?
Of course.
To how the University of Amsterdam is run, because at that level, they must know about this. I mean, they will probably pretend it's not their problem and that it's not because of them, but they'll be aware of that, and maybe some of them might want to do something. But do you think they actually have the room to change something? And if you would have such a position of power, what would you do?
Okay, so the easy answer is yes. But then there are some conditions to be met. How much leeway do you have? What is the political situation? Is there a lot of pressure from politics? Very important. The long march through institutions have had an effect of people protecting their position and almost of a hive mind. So what is the ruling culture or consensus within that group of people that have a permanent job in the university? That's not easy to change.
Mm-hmm. Which is thousands.
So
you'd only be 5.
yeah. So even if, because also universities are very hierarchical societies, and this is what I experienced firsthand when I was invited in a panel discussion about conspiracy thinking, and it was organized at the University of Rotterdam, the Erasmus University, by the Faculty of Criminology. Now, by participating in it and being uninvited by the board of directors of the university in a personal letter, and to me it was very alien. Why are you concerned with this? But through various channels I found out that probably Marianne Koopmans called with the board of directors, and they said, okay, then we cancel him. Literally cancel. So there you see, it is a very hierarchical society, and that means that if you're in the top, yes, you have in theory, the power to change things, but it will not be easy, and that's why I say, well, how much time do you have? One day, well, nothing changes. 1 year, yeah, you can make some tiny changes. I think especially with the money streams, the budgeting, that is of course always the way to change things. Of course, you could be a Don Quixote by trying to attack affirmative action, critical race theory, LGBTQ, the climate ideology, etc., which I think you just have to defund. And the only real antidote is to organize debates, especially on the things they try to avoid discussing. Because if something is not logical, it should not survive in a university environment. But the other thing, and that's what you, and I am helping a little bit at ALM, are doing, is to actually go back to the idea of what is a university? What is its main purpose for society? And what is the product? The person you develop or help developing him or herself, that is the product, not the amount of articles, etc., etc. So if you can motivate people to look in that direction again, I think that is a very potent way in changing or restoring the academic spirit. But there's a lot of conditions to be met. So I completely agree that maybe you have to go back to the beginning, start very small, and show proof of principle. And then if you have done that, maybe you can inspire people, at least show them, well, the system that you are following right now is not the only system.
Yeah. Well, you're already sketching what I'm trying to do, which we are trying to do, which is build from the outside a perspective on how it can be different and hope to inspire many more within the system to either change the system or also step outside, definitely. And we'll get to that to a lot more. But can we home in on what you said, which I think is very powerful, important, on this notion of, well, what should universities care about? Right? I mean, universities, even hundreds of years ago, also cared about their reputation. They also cared about the money. They were businesses, right? So that is innate to practically any sector. But they did have this notion of a whole person that they were trying to help become an adult, a leader of society. And so these universities, more than a century ago, would have seen it as their problem if the students were lonely, if they were addicted to social media, if there was a lot of propaganda hitting them. They would have seen it as their job to shield them from the propaganda, to shield them from commercial incentives, to make a community out of them, to help them become more resilient in terms of their mental health, also to improve their physical health. Not by sending them an app, not by saying, oh, look, here's a website we've paid for you, but by actually taking you to the sports field and, the professor alongside the 20 students doing wrestling, that kind of thing. Now, I speak to a lot of people in mainstream universities, and they are essentially horrified at the notion that this should be their job again. It's sort of, no, that's not my job. That's society, that's government, but not me. I'm here to give them a piece of information, and then I examine you on that information. You as a student are not my problem. You're a customer who's come here for a hamburger of knowledge. Nothing else.
And exactly that mentality will make their job obsolete within a few years through artificial intelligence. So it's very ironic to see this mentality, knowing that where it will lead to the demise of that person trying to defend that mentality.
Yeah.
And I think AI cannot easily be a substitute for academic thinking. And I think people overestimate the capacity of AI, or what it is today. Of course, in the future, we will see more developments, but at this moment, what can you say to such a person? I think it is difficult to change that mentality because they have grown up in that system, but maybe more importantly, a lot of people in university have been selected on that behavioral dynamic or that behavioral model to not take risks, to not think outside the box, to stay within their leeway, and that is a fundamental problem, I would say. You need thinkers that think larger than life and occasionally also live larger than life. And what you see now is a lot of grey mice. And if they are able to communicate, then they're captured in by media companies and they become not a researcher or an academic, but a marketeer for the university. So that's extreme specialization. Another example is that Ron Fouché, he's one of the leading virologists in the Netherlands. But very few people without knowledge of that area of expertise know actually about him. Maybe they knew about his gain-of-function experiments when he was hot, that it was around 2012. But since then, he's been kept more or less out of the limelight. Now, why is that? He's quite honest. He is a nerd. He's good at what he does. And Koopmans is much more savvy in media. So she is pushed forward, every media thing she does, and is defended by, my expertise is only in influenza viruses. That's why on the corona subject I couldn't say anything. But it shows exactly the problem of universities nowadays: the selection and the myopathy of what you think is your job.
And this is the logic of a large bureaucracy. So, I mean, as you intimate, and I agree with that, large universities cannot escape this. They just can't, right? There's too many influences that they can't say no to. And the logic of being a large bureaucracy is to systematize, regularize, and looking after loneliness, mental health, social problems. Propaganda is just a risk, a huge risk. Now then, I want to talk about the alternative, and we've already hinted at this notion of a return to small academies where academics are in charge and they take responsibility for truly trying to help their students. But I want to home in on the role of families here, right? If you think of families with children who are about to go to university, then, I mean, is it child neglect if they send their kid to a mass university?
Well, it's
is that abandoning your child to the wolves, basically?
No, technically not, because that child can only enter university when they're of legal age. So it's not. But I understand the metaphor you're trying to sketch, and I think it is. Convenience. It's a lack of interest. It might be also a lack of their own education. It's mass production. In many instances, it's also what a lot of parents want for their children. Is safety, is having it better economically than themselves, etc. And the university used to provide that. It used to be a guarantee of, my child goes to university. They will be better than me. They will have more opportunities in society than me, which is not the case anymore. But probably in the mindset of the parents, it still is. So then you go for reputations. Leiden University, or Utrecht University, Amsterdam, great universities. Although realistically they have dropped quite significantly.
50 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But that's still the idea. And it's a bit of a catch-22 almost. Like when you return to smaller universities, that is elitist.
Of course.
That is elitist thinking. So that is against the idea that everybody should have the opportunity. It's not an easy sell, I think. And it's not because you downscale, it's economically not very profitable.
It becomes more expensive. Definitely.
And people are now used to, especially in Europe, where it is less common to pay a high tuition fee than, for instance, the United States. That I think the incentive of parents, because the student has no money, so they cannot decide.
No.
The parents have to have a lot of money, but also have to have the notion or the conviction that if they invest that much money into their child, that it's much better for their child. And that is probably the biggest obstacle for a smaller private university to overcome. To reach the parents and to make them see what they're actually giving their children by sending them to these mass universities.
And I want to go a step deeper on the parental thing. Do you think most parents are aware of the challenges their own children face? Even well-meaning parents, and they're affluent. Do you think they realize, as it were, how bad it is with social media, the pressures that has, and the effects that has on thinking, and the propaganda? Do you think parents believe that, or sort of, well, it's not so bad, it'll be fine?
It's very two-sided. So, on one aspect, they completely underestimate it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other aspect is what we see lately is that in Australia now you have to have age verification to be on social media, and this is also becoming the norm in the EU. We are clobbered in the media with all kinds of horror stories of gaming, of pornography, of all kinds of things that could go wrong with digital things. So, on that sense, they are being scared. On the other sense, they're not aware of the content of their children, because it's very convenient. And I see this not even with teenagers or students, but much younger. It's very easy. If you have a tablet and you turn on Peppa Pig and you give it to the child,
I know.
Then it enjoys itself and you can go back to work or do whatever you want to do. So it takes a lot of awareness as a parent to overcome all these pitfalls.
Yeah. And I mean, I have 3 children, and I definitely made, in hindsight, the mistake of putting them in front of social media. My only defense was that when I was young, I watched at least 4 hours of television a day myself as well. Maybe that was a problem as well. But I do think social media now is worse. The addictive properties are worse. And
absolutely.
It has a bigger effect.
Targeting.
Yeah.
It used to be like, this is what you get, and if it doesn't resonate, then you won't pick anything up. But that's almost impossible now, because with the click and the feedback system, they get not what they want to see, but the thing that sticks best from the perspective of the marketeers behind the social media.
It's basically optimized for addiction.
Yes, optimized for addiction.
That's what it literally is. Right? The algorithms work that way. What you keep clicking is what we keep feeding.
Yeah.
If you're not clicking on it, we feed you something else, right? Yeah. Until we figure out what it is. And there's brilliant programmers working out how to make you addicted as best as possible, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. But let's then think about parental responsibility. How far do you think that should go? So we agree on this notion that parents, to a certain extent, have been fooled by the ease of social media, thought it was an easy way to keep the kids quiet, and I admit to having made that mistake myself as well, to my cost. But is then the alternative that they really become, as it were, a full-time family again? Because, of course, that means that the parents can't be working all the time. They can't be busy, making money and power. They've got to spend a lot more time on the kids. And is that then also needed in education, that parents or something like that spends an awful lot of time with these children, so that they're not, as it were, taking the easy addictive substance?
But there you reach something much more essential in society. So the false proposition that has been made to the parents, like, you can have kids and you can have money for it, and you can have nannies for it, and you bring them to school, and you can have both wonderful careers, no problem, which is false. It's false. And you, having an academic wife, have lived through that.
Yeah.
So you know that, and that's probably been a big driving force in starting ALM. And that's part of that notion, or that awareness with parents, that it is not free. The career comes at a cost. And is that the most important thing in life? Could you organize it in a different way? And I think yes, that is possible. But it all starts with that awareness. It all starts with also realizing what is suitable for you. I think we really live and enjoy conversing about academic subjects. But what I see in the mass formation or the ever expanding throughput of universities, also in the number of students, that a lot of people go to university which have no business there. And I know that sounds very elitist, but it is just the way to approach life. Not everybody is an academic. Not everybody is fit to be an academic. So why push so many people towards the idea that if you want to make it in society, you have to go through uni, otherwise you won't make it. If you look at a lot of top entrepreneurs, they have not even finished high school, so it's not true. It's
society,
becoming more true.
I would say it the opposite way around. I would say society doesn't need that many real academics.
Exactly.
And now what we've got is a ton load of fake academics.
Yeah.
Well, they just produce bullshit, both in research and in terms of teaching. But you would like real academics again, but you don't need that many.
True.
So, and that's indeed part of the system we're trying to educate. But what you are talking about is as it were, a reorientation of social life for parents to become more invested in their kids. But they need a structure around that. That needs to be what their neighbors do. That needs to be what their friends do. That needs to be what their own parents do. So that means we've got to relearn to some degree how to be a different community. We're thinking of a different type of community life than we've lived. Now, you and I both come from a big city, and cities have their convenience. But they're not really very strong communities. Everybody's living apart from each other, and they come together for sex and parties and this and that. But if your neighbor tells you, well, you should do this with your child, you hit him. You don't take it seriously. You say, mind your own business. So you're not a community, right? And what you are envisaging is hence maybe not a return to the agricultural villages of 2 centuries ago, but you have some notion of a new community in mind in which, yes, there is more of an interaction with the children, and there is a different orientation towards work. What is that vision of a different community that you have?
Yeah, revaluing the suburban lifestyle. I think where I grew up in Overschie, it's actually a village within Rotterdam, really on the outskirts. You walk 5 minutes and you're on farmland. So I grew up very privileged because within that community there were a few streets which were upper class, and that's where I grew up and had my friends, and the parents formed sort of a community. So I think, I don't know if that model works in every small community, but it definitely worked there. And I think we can learn a lot by seeing or by looking at what worked. What worked for me, what worked in society, instead of trying to put the economic ruler alongside every problem you have. And I think that is, so it's a multi-pronged approach, looking back at what worked for us, looking at the numbers, the developments in society, and going back to where does that awareness start? Where does it stem from? And I think that has a lot to do with self-awareness and also the awareness of what is the meaning of your life. If people become aware of that, I think then they will make choices that fit their lives. They will start living more in those kind of communities. The convenience of a city is also the downfall of it is the weaker communities, as you mentioned, but also less autonomy. You do not really rule your life. You are part of the city and going with the rhythm of the city.
No, exactly. And big cities have this notion of fame and power. You sort of it's hierarchical. You want to crawl to the top and be, number one. It's like the Frank Sinatra song, Yeah. It sort of has that buzz about it, and it's exciting, but also it's intoxicating, and ultimately, stops being fun after a while. You start being lost after a while, and lose out on what the essence of life is, which is to be part of wider things, giving as well as taking, if you like. Now, then I want you, because you're a very imaginative guy, so, I want you to think of the problems of running a small academy. So, you've been part of Academia Liberentis, which indeed was started by people who at least want to be the solution for their own children. That was part of my motivation. So it was a part of the motivation of some of the other founders. Quite a few have been homeschooling. We have kids ourselves. And we hope to at least rescue them, right? But okay, you still have to do a lot of marketing, a lot of admin, a lot of renovation, and it's hard work and this and that. And you have your battles with the media. But when you attract students, they do come in with all these problems still, right? They're 18-year-old, they're formed by what the rest of society's made out of them before, and they are hypersensitive. They are used to cancel culture. They are used to playing the victim on everything, from diet, you should make for me what I want, to television, I must watch this, and otherwise I'll get an anaphylactic fit or whatever it is, right? And so you see them being victims of each other. It's very funny, right? But they come in with all these problems, right? Now, what would you do to, as it were, help that? Because the first advice you get if you're a head of this institute, which is, I guess, my thing, is that people say, oh, you must give them everything.
No, I think the most efficient gratification systems is where they work for everything they get. So it's I think treating them as autonomous people, although they are not yet there. Mm-hmm. I think they like being treated like that, so that's a gratification on itself. But there's many more tools there, and I would say that the pitfall is in not letting it be a social credit system where good behavior earns them points, but academic achievements, yes, and also humanistic achievements. Of course, my role is very limited, but I try to incorporate the whole idea of homo universalis. For them to participate in group activities, in tidying their rooms, in helping restore an old building, in co-writing a book, all those things combined should earn a lot more points than just doing 10 times the same thing. And how to get rid of their bad behavior, of course, some sort of setting boundaries, I think you can't get around. Giving them everything is definitely the worst solution you could think of, because you actually are enhancing their bad behavior. But the alternative, I think giving them the alternative to what they have been doing, to make it very attractive for the person that sees themselves as a victim to be not the victim. I would say that is a challenge, and that's also one of the things that, when we started this conversation, I said, well, when I started university, I was actually wondering, why isn't there a bridge here that you are generally developing your academic thinking? So you could expand on that and say, well, what is it to be human? Almost giving a course on that, and subtly trying to educate them like, yeah, but you, a child and adolescent, is not a full human yet. So how do you get there by being really your own human? And I think that gives them an attractive side to what that obnoxious behavior is, part of their identity. How can you give them the tools to get to a more productive identity?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. I've just with a student of ALM, Shanna Baker, co-written a book called Minds That Dare, and we talk a lot about these things. So I hope you will read it with interest, Willem, and see what we actually did, because we actually truly went to these questions. And as groups of academics, we sat around like a table like here. What the hell are we going to do, right? You care for the students, you want to help them, but you realize just giving won't work. But you also realize just pushing back will just be a fight. You have to set expectations, you have to bring along that kind of thing. And a small academy has lots of tools, a large one doesn't. You can have Wi-Fi in one room, not in the other room. You can have communal decisions decided by the students. What are you going to eat? Vote together, right? That kind of thing. So you have tools that large does not have, and that kind of thing. Now, I want to go to the idea of where the universities, these academies, in this, I would almost say transition period, the transition from mass universities to smaller, better ones again, but also whereby to a certain extent society has to learn to be a different type of community again, one that values children more, one that is perhaps less focused on this fame stuff, less busy with social media. That's a transition of society. Well, should these new academies also make new communities? And if so, who else should be in those communities if it's not just the 18-year-olds? And how do we do that?
Well, I think you partly answered the question yourself. I think it is within the current society, it is not possible to teach that holistic approach of education without building a community that embodies that holistic approach of education. So yes, you have to do that together as a community. And what was the second part of the question?
So the second part of the question was, would it then just be in this transition period, so we go to new types of communities, would you just put the 18-year-olds to be the new type of community, or do you in fact need to have somebody else there as well?
To involve a larger part of society. Well, you have to mimic part of society, so yes, definitely you have to have...
So you'd want, let's say, whole families to go through the same program?
Not necessarily okay. Whole families, but you have to have a family structure in a sense that there is a clear division of labor, there is a clear division of responsibility, of hierarchy. There are people who are role models, teachers and students. So that on itself is already a societal form. But integrating families, it's a very interesting thought, and in that sense, it's also a social experiment, which actually transcends the whole idea of an academic approach or a university, but much more an incubator of mini societies.
That's exactly what we call it, an incubator of communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.